Okay, students, let's go to one of the favorite occupations that we all are familiar with in here in California and the American Southwest, as well as northern Mexico, and that was the missionary position. Um, Now, the Christianization of native peoples are going to occur alongside the material conquest of central Mexico, and it was known as a system called corregimiento. But we don't need to worry about that. All we want to understand is that the native communal agricultural lands, remember the Chinampa system, was controlled by the crown. They were protected by the church against the aggrandizement of private interests operating under what would be known as the encomienda and repartimiento systems. Missions helped in the process of changing native peoples into Spanish-speaking workers. That's the key. Missions not only introduced religious instruction, but they also provided technical guidance for new occupational productions in central Mexico. So that when you went into a mission, there was crafts, weaving, candles, candlestick making, wineries. They're learning of animal husbandry, such as how to deal with cattle, horses, or livestock. And then there was the celebration of religious events using new musical instruments such as the fiddle, the accordion, the harps, and the harpsichord. A priest, in essence, in central Mexico maintained a central mission at a key site and then initiated visits to outlying villages. So the success in central Mexico of the mission system led colonial administrators to incorporate the mission system as part of the colonization movement up north. And one of the reasons why the Spanish are going to move up north into Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California is primarily in response to the French coming down the Mississippi, to the British establishing a foothold in the eastern coastline, and the Russians coming down from Alaska to California. So the Spanish are going to be sending missionized Indians with priests to accompany colonists venturing north. And then these migrations would be protected by military squadrons. But something happened when they sent everybody up at once. And this is what they did in New Mexico. So much so that after 2 generations of living in an arid environment, the people rebelled. And so there was what is known as the Great Pueblo Revolt of 1680. And this revolt encouraged colonial administrators in Spain and in Mexico and central Mexico to proceed in a different direction. And given the violence that occurred from the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, a 3-pronged approach was implemented. And that 3-pronged approach was the mission, the presidio, and the pueblo. Now, ideally, intensive religious activity would methodically subject native peoples to missionary control, thereby modifying their economy, their social structure, their culture, and religious beliefs, and then it would prepare them for entry into Spanish society. So, a mission was very important. You sent first the missionary up to the area without the whole society coming up. It was just a missionary with his native peoples that had already been part of the mission system down in the south. Meanwhile, once a mission center was established, then the missionaries and those native peoples in the mission center would then be protected by armed forces. This is known as the presidio. And the armed forces would coerce, when necessary, the people into a receptive attitude. So theoretically, social religious conversion and military protection would then open up lands to and provide labor forces for mining, ranching, and agricultural enterprises. And then it would create trading opportunities for merchants. So that the result would be market activity, the rise of civil settlements near the missions and presidios, and the gradual rule and domination by Spain. So it was a program of directed cultural change. It was a program of planned assimilation. So in theory, the mission would function as a commercial center, as an educational center, as an agricultural center, and thereby it would attract native peoples to it and settle them down to a Spanish-oriented lifestyle. So mission life can be characterized as a process of turning native peoples into workers for the expanding Spanish colonial market. Native peoples entering a mission site were trained by missionaries or Christian Indians that were recruited from the south for a variety of occupations. So whenever you entered a mission, there were numerous peoples performing different tasks. There were catechists, interpreters, herders, stock raisers, ranchers, blacksmiths, carpenters, muleteers, ox drivers, bakers, rope makers, painters, and orchardists. And that's just to name of the few occupations. They also learned handicraft production and adobe construction. So a mission, whenever you looked at a mission or whenever you see a mission, you have to understand that there was tremendous activity occurring. So once missions were established and then directed change initiated and then the presidios installed, then the native communities would pave the path for contact with colonial society, which would penetrate the region through ranching, which would penetrate the region through mining and merchant exchange, and the establishment of haciendas or landed estates. So this was the plan. But what actually happened was conditioned by the subsistence practices of the original inhabitants and the importance given to their environmental religions. So whenever you take a look at the rich history of the United States Southwest and northern Mexico, it is filled with examples of how native peoples determined the rate and pace of change, and they were the ones that directed the Spanish introduced change. So, when we look at the historical importance of the mission, it is still part of the Mexican experience with migration and immigration. So let's appreciate that whenever you're going around, because the United States likes to appreciate the Spanish heritage here in the Southwest, but without having the Mexican people around. Nonetheless, this is very important to understand with regards to Spanish colonial society. See, because outside of the Spanish colonial infrastructure that is maintained for tourist purposes today, the legacy of that era is that of race-based privileges and biases that were based on a class caste system. This was a system based on the color of one's skin, and this is the legacy. And as I shared with you in the previous presentation, it is still with us. And it affects everyone because we have all adopted the resulting prejudices and biases that are associated with skin color. But the ethnic and the class structure of society in what became the contemporary United States Southwest and northern Mexico was basically a reflection and a continuation of mestizo, mulatto, native, and black ethnic groups that were moving north from Mexico City into areas where the mission system had transformed people, native peoples, into Spanish-speaking workers. So why are people coming up to San Antonio, Texas? Why are people coming up to Albuquerque, New Mexico? Why are people going all the way up to Denver in Colorado? Why are people moving to El Paso, Texas? Why are people going to Tucson, Arizona? And here, why are people going to Nuestra Señora cerca del Río Porciúncula, Reina de Los Ángeles, or up into San Jose or San Francisco? Many people are coming north for economic opportunities, and later generations are the descendants of these groups. So we continue to see the mixing to this day. Most people have direct access to land once the mission system completes the concentration of native peoples into compact communities. Now, what is important to realize is that regional differences became apparent between 1750 through 1800. So it's imperative that everyone learn to appreciate the rich cultural strains that came to be identified as Tejano, Manito, Chihuahuense, Sonorense, and California. Again, all of these racial strains are prevalent today. There is a Tejano culture in Texas. There is what is known as the little brother, that's Manito culture in New Mexico. There is the Sonoran culture that goes from Sonora into Arizona. And then there's what is known as California. So when we take a look at Tejano culture developed in Texas and became characterized by small and medium-sized ranchos operated as family enterprises. And this is the significance of the Tejano experience. The Manito culture that developed in New Mexico witnessed more class stratifications in distinct Spanish and native communities simply because of the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. But everyone was participating in a nascent market activity that was tied to Chihuahua and central Mexico. Sonoran culture forms the basis of Arizona's existence today, and it is heavily influenced by native practices, extreme aridity, and the mining tradition. And then there's California. The California culture became characterized by large-scale properties, while small land holdings were almost absent. And you have to remember that Dominguez Hills is part of the California heritage. It was a large cattle operation that stretched from Downey all the way towards Long Beach and Palos Verdes Peninsula. So get to know it. The mission system thrived along these huge estates. So when we take a look at life in these regions, life in California was not as hard as in other areas. Now, depending on the area, everyone worked to make the system function. Okay, most people were subsistence farmers. They were tool makers and they were cloth weavers. And labor was from sunrise to sunset, depending on the heat. And every day began with a celebration of the Eucharist. People gathered together to celebrate Mass. And right after Mass, people divided themselves into various work groups. Now, native peoples, for the most part, were the laborers, musicians, and artists, and they were loaned to the presidios. So in the colonial period, no one was seen apart or above, and most owned simple homes of adobe, grasses, and wood poles. The furnishings were simple, and people slept on the floor with a blanket. Decorations were basically religious. And the cooking was so key. It was done outside. Barbecues became community events. And by 4 a.m., you could smell the food production. Household activities began. And food production, of course, became an important part of cultural identity. And most importantly, people stressed respect for elders and the obeying of civil laws. People stood when elders entered a room or spoke. People sat only after elders had positioned themselves. And these cultural practices developed amongst the populations. So let's go to a film clip from a 1975 documentary on Tejano culture and music so that we can get a taste for the rich heritage present in Texas. And again, I want to share with you that between 1750 to 1800, unique identities formed in the Southwest. But we're going to take a look at one example, and that's the Tejano culture. And the documentary is entitled Chulas Fronteras. And one of the reasons why that documentary was made in 1975 was because there was discussion at that time to deport Mexicans, because there was inflation and there was the crisis in the American economy at the time, and Mexicans again were being blamed for joblessness amongst the white population. And so this documentary came about by which to challenge or to just share the beautiful culture that was part of the Mexicano experience in Texas. So let's go to that and appreciate Tejano culture.
To tell you the truth, I consider myself, since I was young, a Texas Mexican. Of course, it's like every Texans here, they consider themselves Texans, and then they're Americans, but we really are Americans and then we're Texans. But we like to bring up our state, and that's what I believe all the time, Texas Mexicans, but we're really Texas Americans, should be Mexican Americans. See? In Spanish, I call myself a Tejano. Even when I go to Mexico, I do some business in Mexico, and I tell them I'm a Tejano, so they know that I'm not from Mexico. So they know that, and I have friends over there that have never visited the United States, and when they had visited over here, they come in with a sort of a way of thinking that everybody in Texas wears boots. He said, "Where are your boots?" Well, it's a false impression, because not everybody wears boots in Texas.
Es mi tejana la más bonita, otra como ella no he de encontrar. Con sus besitos me dio la vida, con sus miradas me hizo llorar. Ella es mi dicha y ella es mi anhelo, y da consuelo a mi corazón. Tengo el orgullo de ser el dueño de la...
Okay, students, let's just kind of hold on here. something's going on with regards to the film.
Más bella esa región. Tiene sus ojos negras pestañas y su boquita como un rubí. En mi memoria llevo grabado todos los besos que yo le di. En San Antonio hay muchas flores que no se puede nunca escoger. Porque hay tierras con predilectas que Dios las hizo con su poder. En mi tejana sangre española, la que mis penas puede calmar. Una morena de ojos ojeros que sus amores no he de olvidar.
In Texas, I think we have a very wonderful state, and the one that we have all kinds of music. Like I said, we have German music, which we add some of the polkas to that traditional music. A lot of people hear the polkas the conjunto sing, and some of the boys get the idea that they compose those polkas, but really they are German polkas, which I found out here in New Braunfels when those German band plays the polkas, and they're all the same polka we play. So it's really a German polka, but we give it a little different taste.
So again, hopefully you appreciated the significance of the different identities that were being formed up in the north. And what I want to do is just summarize the missionization and subsequent commercial expansion for this presentation. Because again, depending on the area, everyone worked to make the system function. And as the system spread north, this was the key, is transforming native peoples in a mission system into Spanish-speaking workers. And then sending the different castas up north to colonize the region. And so this was the practice. Cooking was done outside, barbecues became a community event, and cultural practices developed amongst the populations that became truly Mexican. And this was related to the mission system as well as to mestizaje. And again, remember the mixtures of populations. And this is what is unique about the Spanish colonial heritage. Even though there was race-based casta system, the mestizaje was what was important. And so we need to appreciate that the arrival of the people into the area that will become the present-day Southwest United States was constant. It was constant in the colonial period. There was a continuous movement of population to the north. That was constant during the 17th century, which was the 1600s, the 18th century, the 1700s, and the 19th century, the 1800s. And we know that it is constant to this day. And the basic activities included the following divisions. agriculture, livestock husbandry, artisan production, mining, and transportation. But it was agricultural work that was the most basic. Now, so let's summarize the migration experience of the Mexican in the colonial era. And let's appreciate the move to the north, para el norte. Mission trading centers were linked to a mercantile economy that developed in central Mexico. And as this system moved north, a nascent capital formation developed with rising mining, livestock, and commercial agricultural units. And eventually the development of distinct cultural expressions based on aridity and environmental features appeared. And the majority of the population became involved in subsistence and bartering economies. People were moving in and people were moving out of a developing regional economic infrastructure. And the movement of populations, well, that movement of populations continues to this day.